self-organization from the point of view of physics. And just using the phrase self-organization immediately induces, well, what is a self as opposed to non-self? So immediately the whole notion of self-organization implies, or at least induces, the notion of something that you can label the self. So the starting point is fundamental. The way that it's usually written down in the technical literature is in terms of a random dynamical system. Some people would appreciate this as a Langevin equation. From that very simple description of a universe, you can then spin off quantum mechanics, statistical mechanics, classical mechanics, just starting from the notion that there exists some states of some universe whose dynamics are prescribed by where you are in this abstract state space, plus some random fluctuations. That's all it assumes. It doesn't assume space-time in a classical sense at this stage, nor does it at this stage even assume the existence of states, because you have to ask the question then, what is a state? Is it a state of something? Hang on a second, what's a thing?
Quickly, Karl, could I just come in there briefly? I mean, it sounds to me like it's kind of physics almost presupposes sort of Markovian or things like the free energy principle. It kind of depends upon there being objects in order to be able to describe their dynamics. So so this is in some sense more fundamental than even quantum mechanics and so on.
Yes, I think. Well, that's what I meant by the free energy principle does not rest upon quantum mechanics or any of those things. It's alongside it with a particular commitment to say, well, let's make no assumptions, or if we need to make an assumption that things exist, let's define what we mean by a thing, and then just pursue the normal mathematical devices that you use to describe the behavior of things, and the particular mathematical devices or methods that are using the free energy principle rest upon a solution to something called the Fokker-Planck or the master equation or the time-independent Schrodinger equation. So it's just classical off-the-shelf maths and physics, but applied to things where you carefully defined what you mean by a thing. So in that sense, it does not rest upon physics, classical physics or quantum physics.
But Karl, presumably it does presuppose space-time, or at least some sort of manifold that allows these dynamics to unfold within.
No, I say that.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, because I say that deliberately, emphatically, because I watched your interview with Donald Hoffman, so I know how important that question is. But now let me backtrack. Yes, you're absolutely right. There is a manifold in play, and that manifold is necessary before the thing exists. So if you now think about, well, what is something? It has some characteristic states, which means that it must occupy a limited number of states, however you define a state, in relation to all possible states that could be occupied. So something is defined by its characteristics, and if you were Carlo Bravelli, you might say, it has have some measurement or relational aspects. It has to have states that are measured. But the crucial thing is, you are talking about a very limited number of states that define the kind of thing that this thing is. In so doing, you are basically saying that there is a set of states which this particular thing must occupy to be that thing. In so doing, you are now inducing the notion of an attracting set, which could also be read in the context of dynamics as an attracting manifold, or an attractor more simply. And this is exactly, technically what I meant to imply when I said everything rests upon the existence of a description of the universe in terms of a random dynamical system, specifically a random dynamical system that has an attracting set or an attracting manifold. Technically, it's called a pullback attractor. So you're absolutely right that it does rest upon the existence of a manifold, and this is part of the definition of a thing. A thing cannot exist unless it has characteristic states, and those characteristic states now can be read in terms of a pullback attractor. So now the game is, okay, if something is has a pullback attractor, what kind of dynamics must it show? And that's basically the free energy principle. Everything else just follows from that.
Just briefly. So this pullback attractor, is that the thing that enables the persistence of
yes,
the thing that can be regarded as a thing?
Absolutely.
Just very, very brief question here then. So now this is obviously a Markovian boundary that we're referring to here, right? Is it the case that the boundary of the system X, right, is it necessarily the boundary of other surrounding systems? So, are all Markovian boundaries embedded? And if so, is there one super Markovian boundary, which is the universe?
Well, that's an excellent question. Right, and you've taken us off at great speed. And I've just remembered I haven't answered your
should we
space-time
backtrack? Sorry,
question, but let's not forget that because that's really
okay.
important. So, but of course, when you're talking about a manifold, an attracting manifold, you have in mind some trajectories on that manifold. The manifold contains the evolution of states, and just by talking about random dynamical systems and trajectories, you're really committed to time. So when I said no, there is no assumptions about space-time, I was lying. There is an assumption that there is time in play. Not the way that we perceive time, but there has to be some dimension, so one special state that plays the role of time, say through Wick's rotation or something.
Yeah, and a number of physicists regard time as more fundamental, don't they? And then that's the given, that's the free miracle, if you like, and then space can be emergent within that framework.
And that is exactly true of the free energy principle. So space, as we know and love it in terms of Euclidean or metric spaces, has to be an emergent property. And from the point of view of the free energy principle, it doesn't even have to be metaphysical. It just has, metric spaces have to be some good explanation for your sensations or the input from the rest of the universe that impinges upon your boundary. So time takes a special role, but not space-time. If you were talking to my friend Chris Fields, who is the originator of the quantum information theoretic version of the free energy principle, he would actually say, no, everything is completely background free. There's not even any space-time. But when you get under the hood of his particular formulation, effectively where he replaces the boundary or the Markov blanket with a holographic screen.
I love Chris. I've been following his physics as information. It's an amazing course. Yeah. Strongly recommended. Big shout out to Chris.
He's a very clear and very fluent thinker. But still, I still see time taking, despite his claims, it's all background free, and it's just trying to find those symmetries or scale invariant aspects of the mechanics at hand. He still does assume there's some kind of universal clock going on in terms of when you read and what you remember and the like.